hiding such a monstrous technique. He needs to get out of this as soon as he can, and he uses his sword Kai to get out of this. He looks for the fourth young lord, but he disappears, and he is shocked to see Manhwa there, who is calling him for help. He runs toward her and asks what she is doing there when she is recovering from a severe injury and she shouldn't be moving around yet. Suddenly, she gets up and attacks Hajin, but he dodges his attack and discovers that the fourth young lord is pretending to be Manhwa. But he is shocked to see Secret Demon Queen there, and she calls him by his real name and says it is time for his head. Suddenly, his hands disappear, and after that, his feet are also gone. He is struggling in the snake shadow poison palm's illusions, while the fourth lord is watching him joyfully and says it's a shame that he is the only audience. He says he will kill him right there like he said he would do to him, and he might come back and be a nuisance if he doesn't make sure to kill him there. He rushes toward him to attack, but Hajin reacts in time and grabs his neck. Shockingly, he asks him how he escaped the illusion because he had completely fallen for it. Hajin asks him if this is the secret martial arts technique he has been hiding all this time, and it's just as cunning and wicked as its wielder. He punches his face and says he can't attain power with this kind of petty trick. He has wholly eradicated his snake shadow poison plam from his body, and this is all thanks to the poison he put in him earlier. He trained his tolerance when he was an assassin so that he would never fall to poison and quickly escape the fourth young lord's illusion. The fourth young lord is shocked and says he should be on the level of the demonic elders to be able to detoxify his snake shadow poison palm. Hajin comes forward and says he did take a bit longer than he expected, but it's not an accomplishment worth mentioning. However, he has indeed created more trouble for him than he expected, so he will show him what real demonic arts are. He shows him the true openings of the shadow wicked art and uses the underground poison spirit guard gateway technique. There is immense pressure in the air, and the fourth young lord is shocked at how this can happen. He wonders even if he swings his sword. Hajin is just standing there, but his body is being ripped to shreds, and he is targeting his Serpent King demonic arts core energy barrier like it's just a piece of paper. He is not even moving his body, and he takes out his sword to attack him at the same time. The fourth tries to attack him. He uses the heaven-splitting triple slash technique and tears his body with his sword. He then falls to the ground, and Hajin asks him about his last words and says the lives of humans' life disperse away meaninglessly like the smoke of the tobacco he always smokes. He then takes out his sword after saying goodbye, but he faces some formless energy that bounds his sword and stops him from doing so. He is the penal hall master Gagu and recalls they agreed not to cause any further trouble. He asks Hajin to put his sword down at this moment and uses the skill of avoid capturing object. It is a skill that allows someone to control the movement of an object without touching it. It's a skill that requires advanced martial arts knowledge. Hajin asks him why he should be nice to someone who wants to kill him, and he replies that they are still in their territory. He cannot accept them fighting there even if they are the young lord. Hajin turns toward him, says he doesn't know his place, and asks him if he wants them to tremble in fear of the penal law hall regardless of their status. He swings his sword and breaks his energy form, and Gagu is shocked to see that he broke the inner energy chain in just one attack. He asks him if he can take responsibility for antagonizing the penal law hall. But Hajin attacks him, saying this is something he should be taking, and Gagu finds that the depth of his demonic energy is comparable to that of Supreme Peak, but his demonic arts skill doesn't live up to it. However, his skills are different, and his speed and movements are on par with his. Hajin uses the second form of the nine-fold resilient calamity blade technique. He throws an attack toward Gagu while he is trying to dodge him, but the energy of his blade is far hotter than he expected. Soon, there is a vast destruction, and if he had reached just a bit slower, he would have been burned to ashes. He has used too much inner energy. If Hajin uses a more vital demonic art next, he won't survive. However, Hajin gets silent, and Gagu wonders why there isn't another attack because someone as skilled as him wouldn't miss this chance. But he wasn't his target from the start, while he was rushing toward the fourth lord to attack him. He tries to stop him, but Hajin doesn't listen to him and penetrates his sword through his body. He exclaims he has thought about it and thinks the fourth lord should also lose everything she has. There is a famous proverb, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Similarly, a Kai blockage for a Kai blockage, so he also makes him suffer from Kai blockage. He has destroyed the core of the poison that was above his energy core, and his muscles have gotten small and weak. This is because he maintained his muscles through mystical arts instead of training his body. That is the limitation of having raised his martial prowess with only illusions, and he won't die right away, but he will be bedridden for several years. Even if he tries to recover, he will have to start his martial arts from the very beginning, and he will send him some medicine and acupuncture needles. Meanwhile, some black guards appear there and ask the hall master if he is hurt anywhere. Hajin surrenders and says they can arrest him. After some time, they take him to jail, and he asks the hall master if he won't ask him anything. He exclaims that his wrists are hurting and asks him to free him because he will not run away. The hall master replies that he is currently imprisoned, which means he is a criminal, so he can't comply with that request. He states that he means it when he says things would get complicated, and Hajin asks him to act like the penal law hall master who doesn't want any conflict within the cult. He exclaims that there won't be any conflict now and says there needs to be more than one person for conflict to arise, but the fourth young lord is now incapacitated. He breaks the chain off his neck and hands easily and asks him why he is saying things will be difficult for now. Gagu is shocked to see that he broke the prohibited sea iron so quickly, and Hajin says if he hadn't respected him, he would have run out of there before he even got these handcuffs on him. He thinks he has done everything he can to be patient, considering his status as the third young master, and Gagu asks him what he will do if he doesn't release him. Hajin didn't think he was someone to drag out conversations with meaningless theoretical situations, but he guessed he was mistaken. He is about to leave when Gagu warns him, saying he will keep an eye on him. Hajin warns him not to get in his way, and he doesn't want to become enemies with the penal law hall. Gagu exclaims he is really confident when he hasn't been named as the successor yet, and he is one of many candidates. He leaves the prison without saying anything, and Gagu thinks he is a complex and dangerous man. He observed that the third young lord's martial arts were more potent and brutal than the demon cult's martial arts, and the sword technique he used was that of the Orthodox faction. After some time, he eats a lot of food and demands more food, while the squad leader and Dongpol ask him to slow down since no one will steal food from him. She asks him if the penal law hall didn't feed him, and he replies that they only serve stale rice and wild vegetables. Dongpol asks him if it is all over now, and if there will be any retaliation from the fourth young lord or higher-ups. He says the fourth lord is now crippled and can't even move his body, and the higher-ups turn their heads the other way when it comes to fights between candidates, so he doesn't think anything will happen. It's all over now, and everything is taken care of, so he asks them to return to their organizations. He calls Dongpol and says he has been with his way for way too long, and he is not just a regular member of the Guardian Court, and he is the third leader. He then calls the squad leader Yui and asks her to get back to her responsibilities as squad leader too. She replies that she is already doing what she needs to do, and that he does not need to tell her. He is done eating, so he leaves, saying goodbye. Yui says he is so heartless and he didn't have to go away so coldly. She asks Dongpol if he is also upset by his behavior, but he has a weird expression on his face. He states that he feels like the young master is saying goodbye to them for the last time. He then goes to Anqua, calls her, and says she doesn't need to move like this, but she sits on his feet and thanks him for saving his life. He is glad to see that she is okay while she is just crying badly. On the other side, the first guardian informs the demon lord that the fourth is in a very bad condition. His energy core is broken, and the poison is taking over his body. He is holding on to his physical strength, but even if he gets lucky, he will just barely avoid becoming a cripple. The demon lord asks him what the livelihood of recovery is, and he replies that the physicians of the Blood Spirit Pavilion assessed that it's basically impossible. Even if they are able to heal the poison and internal injuries, the energy core is too severely damaged for him to return to his previous life. He asks the first guardian to leave, and the demon lord thinks he always thought that the third lord would end his life, but he lets him live. He wonders why the third changed his mind at the moment, or if he wanted to make the fourth suffer the same fate. He thinks about his recent activities, the private meeting with the Internal Enlightenment Facility Master, the fight with the Berserk Demon Squad leader, and now the fight at the Penal Law Hall. The third has created more chaos than possible for one person in the last few days, but what's important is that he managed to achieve his goals in all that chaos. He thinks this is how one side of the succession fight collapses. It is stated that the fourth young lord, Hong Yuamun, is the son of the patriarch of the Gyeoksa family who had as much talent as any other child. With time, the fourth became sly like a venomous viper, like all those who had inherited the true blood of the Gyeoksa family, but that was fine. It doesn't matter what one's personality is like as long as one's talents bloom, but the problem is that Hong Yuamun didn't tend to his talents. He did the bare minimum. He was strong for his age, but that was the way he lost. But the third young lord is different, and there was a time when he was similar to the fourth, but after waking from Kai blockage, he has been striving to do the most rather than the least. A small but significant difference decided the outcome of their fight. On the other side, Anhwa informs Hajin about a guest at their home, and he is surprised to see Yeonsun there. He asks her what brings her there and wonders why she is there since there isn't anything unresolved between them anymore. She replies that she has a favor to ask him and asks him to come to his residence if he has the time. She tells him that it's about the martial arts method he taught her, and it hasn't been long, but there is already a difference. He replies that the person must be very talented because it's not easy for most people to achieve it in a short period of time. She reveals that she had picked out that child herself to be her successor, and Hajin asks her if it is okay for her to tell him something like that. She states that it's not something she should be announcing to anyone, but she doesn't really care anyway. She doesn't trust people, but she trusts situations, and judging from the situation back then and now, she doesn't think they will ever become enemies. Hajin tells her that her successor's recovery is going well and asks her what she wants from him now. She states that she made all the final decisions in the internal enlightenment facility, but the child is responsible for commanding and carrying out the decisions. Therefore, her hands and feet are basically bound right now, and if the situation continues for more than a month, the cult will suffer severe losses. Hajin thinks this is not good for the internal enlightenment facility master, who has a strong ego and knows better than anyone how this cult works, to ask him for help. He thinks Yeonsum would do anything to try to persuade him if it's for the sake of the internal enlightenment facility. He observes his eyes and feels that it's like she's telling him she won't accept no for an answer. However, he asks her to make a deal with him and is sure she would feel burdened if he just helped her one-sidedly. She asks him if she wants something from him in return, and he says there isn't anything he can think of at the top of his head. Suddenly, he remembers something and thinks the facility master, their blessed and merciful internal enlightenment facility, manages the livelihood of the cult. All the goods that are distributed in the cult are sourced from outside, and he asks her if the things get delivered there or if they go out. She replies that they go out for essential items, and some people will leave the cult after 2 weeks. He grabs her hand excitedly and says he will ensure the recovery of her successor in 2 weeks, and she has to let him escape the demon cult. On the other side, Dongpul meditates and thinks about what the third young lord said earlier, and thinks he is right because he gets so used to being with the young master that he almost neglects his work. He decided to get it together and was sure he would see the young master again. Meanwhile, a guard appears there and informs him that the first leader wants to see him. He goes to see him, and he tells him that he is swamped so that he will get straight to the point, and the escort of the demon army commander is in 3 days. His duties have been changed, and he is aware that the internal enlightenment facility sends members of their cult out every 3 months to deliver essential goods. He gives him a page and says this month happens to be that month, and he asks the first guardian if he is supposed to escort the cult members in charge of the delivery. Things in the cult have been quite chaotic with the upcoming Mara festival, and he doesn't think anything would happen, but considering the situation, they can't let them go on their own. The festival is in 2 weeks, and the essential details are all written on there, and asks him to burn the page after he memorizes its contents. Dongpul promises him to accomplish his duties successfully. At the same time, the facility master takes Hajin to her successor and tells him that her name is Juhua, and that she is just as skilled with getting work done as she is with martial arts. She was known for being a genius when she entered the cult, and she is just in charge of a part of the facility, but she's also serving as an overseer without anyone knowing. The internal enlightenment facility came to a standstill after this child fell into this state, and this just goes to show how many responsibilities she had and how good she was at handling them. Hajin is surprised to see that she looks around his age, but she's already overseeing an organization as big as the internal enlightenment facility. Moreover, Juhua has deciphered the boundless technique within just a few days and utilized it enough to see improvement. He takes a look at her condition first and releases his demonic energy, while Yeonsum is surprised to see his amazing demonic energy. He's only using a bit of it, but the quality of the energy is excellent, and Hajin finds out that it's easy to conform her boundless technique with his because she's already learned it partially. Now, if he just removes the toxic energy, he starts taking it out through the blood. 10 days later, and 1 day before the 2 weeks, she wakes up. But Yeonsum is shocked to hear his demand that he wants her to sneak him out into the delivery squad without the cult leader knowing. She asks him to realize his ridiculous request, but he replies he doesn't know about that. But he does remember that she said she didn't want this to be a favor but a transaction. She gets worried and asks him to end things with a favor, but he replies that the ship has already sailed. She gets angry and uses abusive language, and he is surprised to see that she also says things like that. He asks her why he should work so hard to treat her successor, but she shouts at him and refuses his demand. She asks him if he wants to deceive the cult leader, and she will pretend that she didn't hear him, and he replies that it is not misleading the cult leader. He states that the cult leader has no interest in his disciples in the first place, and he just reigns over them. She tells him that the cult leader isn't the only problem. If someone hears that a successor candidate sneaked into the delivery squad, others will be suspicious of the internal enlightenment facility. Hajin says he knows he has the power to crush the rumors like that, and she agrees that she has that kind of power. She tells him that is a very different matter from political retaliation or covering up malicious rumors. If things go wrong, the other organizations in the cult will try to interfere with the candidates too, destabilizing the divine cult. He asks her if she isn't worried about what someone would request from her after they help her bring a person back from the dead. He doesn't want to discuss the value of life anymore, and he doesn't like to feel like he is guilt-tripping her or anything. Yeonsum thinks she doesn't have a choice now, and they made a deal with the life of a precious child at stake, so she should keep her end of the bargain. However, it will take her some time to think of a way, and she is already stressed that the child wants to lead the delivery squad when she's not even fully well yet. Hajin asks her if her successor wants to lead the delivery squad, but she is in no shape to take on such a role just yet. After some time, he goes to her room and says she is strong enough to be moving around like that. She asks him who he is, and Hajin asks her to think of him as something like a physician. She asks him about his identity, and he replies that he is someone who helped her get out of the Kai blockage. She realizes that she is the person who gave the martial arts technique and thanks him for his favor. Hajin asks her how she can believe him when they have never met each other, and she replies that an internal enlightenment facility is a place where suspicious people can just enter. Hajin observes that she is quick to judge the situation, and he hears that she is tenacious but flexible. He appreciates her and says that with some enlivening of the core energy and half a day of warming up, she should be fine making the trip. Meanwhile, Yeonsum enters the room, and he tells her she is in a better condition than she anticipated and won't have to worry as long as she's with him. Yeonsum is shocked and asks him how she can travel when she barely got out of bed rest and if she were to pass out again. Juhwa calls her and says the commandment of the delivery squad is her main duty, and she has no idea how anxious she was the last 6 months because she couldn't fulfill that duty. She requests that she go with the delivery squad. After some time, they are finally leaving, and it has been almost a year since he woke up in the body of the third young lord of the heavenly demon divine cult. After what feels like a decade, he finally gets to breathe in the air outside. If he does well, he might succeed in escaping forever, and their destination is somewhere near Jiangxi. There are 2 safety houses in Jiangxi made for assassins, and they are both quite far from the neighboring areas of the Guangdong province, but with his current abilities, he will be able to get there if he runs for 3 days without rest. Meanwhile, Juhwa apologizes for being rude to him, not knowing he is the third young lord. Hajin apologizes, asks her not to think about it, and says he should apologize to her for entering her room like that. She also thanks him for his help, and if it weren't for him, she would have never gotten out of Kai blockage herself. He replies that he just happened to know the method, and the one who saved her using that method was the facility master. Suddenly, he feels very familiar and heavy energy from his surroundings, and he wonders who this person can be. At the same time, Dongpul appears outside and introduces himself as the substitute commander of the delivery squad, and he has come there to escort them to their destination. Hajin is shocked to see him there and wonders what he is doing there. He is instructing the other guards to accompany their delivery squad, while Hajin thinks it will be terrible for him if he sees him there. He asks Juhua how her body is doing and if she circulated her kai today. He grabs her hand and lets her sleep, saying sleep is the best medicine, so she should sleep for a bit. He then calls Dongpul from the cart, and he is surprised at some familiar voice and thinks it is definitely the third young lord's voice. Hajin again calls him from his cart and asks him to come to him, and he shockingly asks him what he is doing there or if he is part of the delivery squad this month. Hajin asks him not to talk out loud and to communicate with him with the distant whispering technique, and he asks him why they are in charge of escorting the delivery squad. Dongpul replies that the atmosphere doesn't seem quite right as the Mara festival is just around the corner, so they are tasked to escort the delivery squad and ask him if he is on some secret mission. Hajin asks him to think something like that and not to tell anyone he is there. He has never expected that the very person he is the closest to in the cult would be there when he is trying to run away. He wonders if he will successfully run away when things are like this. On the other side, Iron Blood Fortress Steel Will Squad Captain Oh Jong-hwa is waiting for the delivery squad to come their way, and they will attack them. However, he is unhappy because he has been assigned to such a lowly mission with those inferior people. One of his guards asks him to use his words carefully because they are still a well-trained organization, but he gets angry with him. He asks him to remind him that he brought him in as vice captain despite his shitty swordsmanship. He exclaims that they, the Iron Blood Fortress, are still the most powerful and no one can do anything to them. He thinks robbing the demon cult delivery team would be a piece of cake for them, and they have to work with the Southern Savage Beast Palace. They really live up to their names because they are just beasts. He thinks no one would ever want to work with them because they are just hungry beasts who will eat anyone coming their way. It had been about a decade since they last saw people from the demon cult, and he hoped that it would be good fun this time. On the other side, Juhua wakes up and gets scared to see Hajin there, and he asks her to be careful because he will get a scolding from the facility master if she pulls a back muscle. She is surprised that she slept for half a day, but Hajin tells her she slept for half a day. It is good that he puts her to sleep because her body was exhausted from all the activity immediately after emerging from Kai blockage. Even if she has prepared well with the internalization of power and Kai circulation, he is still human, so he asks her to rest. He gives her something to eat, saying she would be hungry after being asleep for 2 days, and gives her the rice balls and beef jerky made by the delivery squad. She thanks him. Hajin says she is the reason he is present there and also takes Goldie from his luggage. Juhua gets scared to see him, but he doesn't notice her reaction and offers some rice balls to Goldie to eat. He then tells Juhua that his name is Goldie, and she asks him if he is his pet. She is shocked because she has never met someone with a fox as a pet. He then leaves the cart, saying he will rest, and goes to Dongpul, who has called him. First, he apologizes to him, saying he should not call him in the forest at the moment, while Hajin says there is no need to be so formal with him when he is already stressed enough. He asks him if he faced any inconveniences in the carriage, and he calls him there because he thought he should know this in advance. It's a message they received in the Guardian Court before they set off, and this was the reason they were assigned to this mission. Hajin is shocked to read the message and asks him if it is true. At the same time, a first elder told a man that the world is filled with depravity, but they already knew that, and the weather was rather cold, but the further south they went, the warmer it got. The north is cold for sure, and even though this fabric isn't meant to be worn, the carpets from the west should be helpful. The elder asks him how his life is in Jiangxi, and he replies that the land there has always been good, but that's not all there is to life, and times have been hard. He tells the elder about the demon cult's festival, and to the demon cult, the Mara festival is the greatest event. He heard that they had been all over the place collecting valuables. However, things have been chaotic because of those robbers. The elder exclaims that he has enough experience in managing a sect, but since the alliance is a new environment for him, he will look for a suitable position for him. The man gets up and thanks him and says he doesn't know who might have heard that his cultivation has reached the entrance realm. He asks the elder to be careful because he is worried that the evil cult members might do something to him. The elder laughs and says he may be old, but he is still sprightly, and even if the demon cult leader were to come, he would scold him and tell him to get out of his sight. He is the righteous Heavenly Alliance's first elder, Yong Ilryong, and Hajin remembers him from his previous life. In his past life, he asked him how it is being the Alliance leader's hunting dog these days. He called him so impressive that he was doing such work at that age, and he replied that his work was nothing compared to the effort he put in trying to steal the Alliance leader's position. Jung says it seems like it's about time he retires and he is not as discreet in his work as before. Now people are talking about him and calling him the world's best martial artist. Hajin asked him why he was upset that some assassin was the first elder of the righteous Heavenly Alliance and said he didn't care about what the public thinks. He angrily called him and said he would give him a piece of advice and asked him to watch his back. After that, in the last moment of his life, he was the one who cut off his right leg without mercy. He is now angry to think that he is nearby, while Dongpul is unable to understand what he is talking about. On the other side, the squad leader Yui comes to his home for a drink, but she can't sense his presence there. Anghwa tells her that he is not there and only says that he is going to train. She is surprised that he went for training when he was already that strong. Later, she finds his sword there and is surprised at how he can leave his sword behind when he is gone for training. At the same time, Hajin asks himself to calm down because it doesn't matter whether Jung is nearby or not, and his goal is just freedom. He decides to visit all the safe houses he has prepared throughout the Central Plains, recover his martial arts, earn money, and then leave the country. He can't forget his goal and dream, but he wants to kill the first Elder Jung at any cost. Juhua felt his expression and asked him if he was okay. Suddenly, Goldie jumps from her lap and reaches his face. On the other hand, the subordinate tells Dongpul that there is not too much to take back, which means the things they are taking are really valuable. The subordinate asks him what kind of audacious would try to rob the divine cult, and Dongpul says they still shouldn't let their guard down until they are done. They realize that the patrol team is late, and they are not usually the kind of dawdle, and it seems like the terrain is slowing them down. After a while, they see some of them coming toward them in an injured state and tell them that there's a fight at the handover point. Dongpul asks him whom they fight with, and they tell him that they are in the midst of making their retreat. There's a very skilled martial artist among them, and Hajin comes outside and asks them about the person. On the other side, the squad leader is watching the things their men have stolen and says these are all rare medicinal herbs. They wonder why they are buying these things in bulk and why these things are necessary for the Mana festival. One of his subordinates tells them that there are no survivors on the enemy's side and they obtained all of their items too, so they just need to set the place on fire before leaving. There are 3 with minor injuries on their side and none are severely injured or dead. He gets angry with them and asks how strong the enemy was that their people took minor injuries. He reveals that they have led about 4 or 5 people on purpose, and he orders him to get those men to load the things up. Meanwhile, one of the injured guards is still alive, and he exclaims that he is quite determined. He is the one who got hit by his palm strike, and the guard asks him if he is from the inner cult. The squad leader makes fun, saying they are funny to worship the demon lord, and all of the demon cult members are out of their minds. He kicks him again, saying he should die and go to his demon god if he likes him so much, and keeps his shoe on his neck and asks him to die. He challenges him, saying if their demon god really exists, then he should come to save them. Meanwhile, a huge man appears behind him and says he needs to feed the kids. He asks him to tell his subordinates to bring something. The squad leader asks him why he obeys his orders, and he replies that he was told that his squad will be responsible for feeding them. The squad leader asks him to keep his promise. The squad leader shouts at him and says he should think of all the things they have already eaten, and the man replies that they are just making a request that they need more food. He angrily leaves, saying beasts like them need to be fed at all times, and asks them to feed on the demon cult guys, saying he will provide more corpses for them soon enough. He thinks he will bury all of them beasts once they are done with this. After some time, Hajin and the other squad reach there, and they are shocked to see that they have destroyed the building to erase any traces that might have been left behind. Juhua observes that it's a bit hastily done, and she feels like they could have done a better job if they wanted to get rid of their traces. She says this sloppy work is either a trap, or they must have run to a very good hiding place where they won't be able to find them, and she asks Dongpul to send out a message to the nearest branch. She needs some time to think things over, so she orders the captain to take care of the corpses. She thinks it's too late to wait for orders from the higher-ups, and in this case, it would be better to take of things first and then make a report. Their cult has a strong influence in Jiangxi, and they will be able to track the enemy down even if they don't hurry. Dongpul asks her to rest since she has only recently recovered from Kai blockage, and she replies that she has recovered most of her martial arts because of her physician. Dongpul thinks if she were impatient or obsessed with just getting accomplished, she would never take such actions. She has recovered from Kai blockage so quickly, and he wonders if she was talking about the young master when she said physician. Meanwhile, Hajin calls him to the carriage, saying he has a favor to ask of him, and he gives him the blade he asked for. He replies that he will be able to find their trail about 20 kilometers northeast, and the enemy's pretty intense, so they should try to avoid an all-out confrontation as much as possible. He states that the Guardian Court's top priority is to safely escort the delivery squad back to the cult with the goods. He advises them to move as quietly as they can before uncovering who the enemy is. Dongpul asks him what he will do then, but he orders him to get moving and runs away from there. He thinks something is not correct, and clearly the demon cult has a strong influence in Jiangxi, but the Righteous Heavenly Alliance's first elder is also there. He needs to find out what is going on there. At the same time, the beasts are feeding on the corpses, and the squad leader exclaims they are all greedy and asks him about the men when he is coming. Meanwhile, the first elder Young appears there and asks if they are waiting for him. He greets them with the Steel Will squad captain and says it has been a while, and he asks him what took him so long to they are there. Elder Young states that he had some business to tend to, and he is not that late though, so he doesn't need to be mad at him. He turns towards the beasts and asks them if they are the renowned beasts, and the captain says it has been really annoying because of them. Elder Young goes to their leader and asks him about his name, and he tells them his name is Yule Liang. He is the beloved disciple of the Beast Palace Master, and unlike the martial arts of the Central Plains, the martial arts of the palace are rather bizarre. It is said that as soon as the opponent lets their guard down, even an expert martial artist can be defeated. Elder Young says his potential Kai energy and even most peak realm martial artists of the Central Plains won't be able to endure 10 attacks from him. The captain doesn't like this and asks Elder Young why he is being so nice to that savage. He replies that each and every one of the 4 outer wall palaces is an organization with very skilled martial artists. They are relatively quiet now, but it's only sensible to find out as much as he can about an organization that he doesn't know will be an enemy or an ally. The squad captain says if they're an ally, they should kill them, and Elder Young says he needs to do something about that temper of his if he wishes to climb even higher. But he says he will live his life on his own, and he can die if he has a problem with this. Elder Young asks him if he has brought the promised item, and he replies that it isn't a personal request, but one from the higher-ups, and it's a critical mission. He gives him a bag which contains a stone in it, the Jade of Calamity. The captain asks him what it is that he went so far to obtain it, and he replies with a proverb that one man's trash is another's treasure. However, this wraps up their transaction, and the captain says he thought he would stay to have a few drinks. The Elder Young says he also loves to stay and chat like the old days, but he is rather busy. The captain asks him to take this chance to enter the Steel Blood Fortress, and the Elder Young asks him if he is suggesting he join the fortress. The captain asks him what is wrong with him joining the fortress, and it's only natural to convert a talented person to their organization. The Elder Young thanks him for saying that, and asks him if he is even in the position to offer him something like that since he is just a squad captain. The squad captain gets embarrassed and says he didn't need to say something like that, and is about to say something when Elder Young stabs his hand in his chest. He repeats his saying that if there's an ally, they work together, they need just to kill them. He asks the squad captain to figure out who his enemies and allies are and fix his shitty personality of his in the afterworld. He kills the squad captain while his men rush to help him. The Elder Young asks how many minions did he bring there. He calls Yule Yang and asks him if he is willing to have another meal for his beasts, and he agrees happily, saying he can't say no to this. At the same time, some people are packing some luggage in a village, and one of them asks another about when the first elder will be coming. He replies that he went somewhere quite far from there and will be there for about half a day. The guard again asks if it is okay for him to have gone somewhere so far on his own, and they suppose that he went to take bribes again. They are near the demon cult's base, and for him to travel alone without an escort is dangerous. The man states that the first elder went to pay respects to his mother's grave, and that is what they must say if the alliance were to ask the reason they stayed in Jiangxi. They are all dependent on the first elder, so they need to be careful not to leak any stories about him, and if anything goes wrong with the first elder, and if anything goes wrong with him, it'll be a problem for them too. Suddenly, they look towards the woods and find something strange about the woods. They are just observing the situation when Hajin appears from nowhere and destroys everything. He reaches them in no time and jumps upon them to attack. There is a huge explosion of demonic kai there, and grabs one of the men about the first elder. He starts crying and says he only hears that he's going to visit his mother's grave, but Hajin shouts at him and says he will kill him if he doesn't tell him the truth. He wonders why the first elder of the righteous Heavenly Alliance leaves his escorts behind, and he has come there to kill young Ilryung before leaving. At the very least, he wants to take his leg, and thinking about him makes him feel an ache in his right leg that was cut off in his past life. He then leaves the village looking for him and thinks he will definitely kill him. On the other side, Elder Young has killed all the people of Steel Blood Fortress and says Yule, and has made a wise choice allying with him instead of the Steel Blood Fortress, and anyone would choose to ally with a side that treats them better. He then asks him about the Palace Master, and he replies that the medicine he brought them has had some effect, and he thinks he will soon be up and running again. He then asks him about the thing he received from the squad captain, and the Elder Young replies it's the Jade of Calamity. He says he doesn't need to know, and all he needs to know is that it's a treasure that will be useful in his work. He asks him if he will use it on the righteous Heavenly Alliance leader, but he asks him to stay quiet. He then talks about the wolves he has brought, that they have a great appetite and are the beasts that can win against swordsmen. He is seeing all kinds of occult studies that he has never heard of, and Yule says the Great Beast King technique isn't some kind of occult study. It teaches beasts to learn how to internalize power as humans do, and he means that they can understand his orders from the movements of his hand. He states that he and the Blood Squad are connected through their spirits and upper energy cores, so they understand even the most detailed of orders. Elder Young says he was always curious whether something like that was possible when he heard that he worked with beasts. He thinks that if he uses these guys to his advantage, then he can take the position of the leader of the righteous Heavenly Alliance. Suddenly, one of the wolves howls, and Yule tells him that it seems like the Blood Wolf Squad leader smelled members of the demon cult. He doesn't know the exact numbers, but it seems like there are about 100, and Elder Young asks him if they have tasted the blood of demon cult members before. He replies that they have ambushed them nearby, and they missed a few, but it wasn't a bad meal. The Elder Young knew they would be out and about because of the Mara festival that's coming up and asked how they are compared to the Blood Wolf Squad. He replies that there are a lot of them, and there are some very strong ones among them too. The Elder Young asks him to show him how good his Blood Wolf Squad is, and Yule exclaims they will all die before sunset. At the same time, Donkpul comes toward this side and asks everyone to stop, and he asks them if they feel the same as him. It's not demonic energy, but it's very violent. Juhua also feels something and says the smell is inhuman, and they also feel the intense smell of blood. Donkpul is sure that a lot of people must have died, and in the meantime, Yule reaches them with his wolf squad. He asks him about who he is and wonders if they were the ones who attacked the delivery squad earlier, but he doesn't reply to them and orders them to rip them apart. All the wolves rush upon them to attack, and Donkpul orders his men to spread out. Juhua also spreads her demonic energy and asks everyone to watch out. The wolves attack the guards and bite them badly, and Donkpul is shocked to see the wolves bigger than cows and wonders where such monsters came from. He tries to attack them, but their skin is like steel, and he can slice through boulders easily with just his inner energy, but all he can do is merely leave scratches on them. Even if he wants to try to imbue his sword with his kai, the wolves are moving too fast for him to do that. Just purely attacking won't do anything, and one of the wolves rushes toward him to attack. Juhua appears there and asks him to stand back, uses her moonlight demonic arts, and attacks the wolf. She then asks the delivery squad to stay on the inside so that they don't get in the way of the Guardian Court members. She tells him that they should retreat because this is not a fair fight for them. These aren't the regular wolves, and at this rate they will all be killed, and the Guardian Court will protect the delivery squad from the wolves. Donkpul orders the Guardian Court's third squad to use the spinning formation, and they will spin around endlessly at high speed to make the wolves dizzy. They will stop them from getting anywhere near them, and Elder Young explains that it is interesting to see this and says he doesn't even seem to have much combat experience. He has set up a defense formation and uses the features of that formation to his advantage to attack the wolves. They wonder if the blood squad will be okay, and he knows that formation can only stall for time, but they won't be able to get close like that. Yule says it's fine, and they can easily break an amateur formation like that because they don't know yet how terrifying the blood wolf squad can be. They will see how long they can hold up against the wolves. In the meantime, Hajin finds the first elder young and says this is the place where he is. They are impressed by Donpal's skills that he has set up a defense formation and used its features to his advantage to attack the wolves. Juhwa is attacking them, but is shocked to see that the wolves are predicting his attacks, and Donpal rushes toward her, saying it's getting dangerous. He uses his skill to return to the heavens, kills 2 wolves in just one attack, and asks Juhwa to stick closer to the formation. She is amazed by his sword aura, which is quite powerful, but it's getting dangerous because he looks way too tired. His last attack consumed so much of his inner energy, and the demonic energy has gotten rough, and his breathing is unstable. He wonders what he should do now because everyone is getting tired, and just defending themselves won't cut it. He orders everyone to open the formation and asks everyone to run in, and he asks everyone to run as fast as they can toward their branch. The elder Jung says they have made a boring choice and exclaims that they are doing much better than he expected, and the wolves have taken quite some injuries too. Even if they are injured and exhausted, they are still demon cult members, and if they let them return to the cult, there will be consequences. He asks Yule what he will do now, and if he will show them the terror of the southern savage beast palace's successor. First, he watches Donpal fighting and then jumps from the mountain to attack him. He collapses at his full speed and everyone shouts the third leader. Juhwa also rushes to help him and freezes Yule's hand. But he smiles and says this king of martial arts is child's play, and she is shocked to see that his martial arts were so easily broken. She then kicks her badly and says it's time for pain, and Elder Young says it seems the demon cult has downgraded. She twisted her body just in time to avoid being hit at her crucial point, but he grabbed her by the hair and asked other guards to listen to her closely. If they don't want to watch their leader get eaten alive, they better not even dream of running away. He calls his blood wolf squad to stop standing by, and more than 10 of them were killed by these insects, and they killed quite a lot of his wolves. However, he exclaims that he can just raise more of them, but he is not so nice that he can just move one from the fact that he spent a lot of time and effort raising those wolves. The subordinate squad captain asks him to let go of her this instant, but he orders his wolf squad leader to attack and kill him. Donpal asks the captain to move, but before that, a wolf attacks his head and kills him. Yule smiles and says it has a lovely sound and asks Juhwa to watch closely as her subordinate gets eaten alive. Suddenly, Donpal attacks him from behind through his sword aura, but he dodges his attack and wonders if he still has some strength left in him for this kind of technique. Donpal thinks that was the last attack he could blow, but Yule hits him to the ground badly and says he is quite determined. Donpal thinks his destruction power is enough to overpower first-rate martial arts with just external arts, and they will all die if they don't get away. Yule drags him to the ground at a great distance, and everyone is shocked to see the third leader dying in front of them. Yule calls his wolf squad and says it's mealtime for them, while Juhwa asks everyone to run away and alert the cult on what's happening there. Yule says there is a portion of food everywhere for them and asks them to eat as much as they want. He has called forth the beasts around the area too and says their bodies will be ripped to pieces and they will die unimaginably painful deaths. All the beasts surround them and the Elder Jung is happy to see this interesting scene. The beasts of the demon cult are being subjugated to real beasts, and this Jonxi is dotted with delusions. A swordsmanship who saved a family because he could not stand injustice, the romanticization of sharing a drink on a sailboat over friendship. However, Jonghu is just one face of the world, and it's not something he likes, but the world revolves around one rule, which the demon cult people love to chant. Eat and be eaten is the rule of beasts. In the end, humans are beasts too. Whether they rip someone to pieces or deceive them to their death, they kill and kill to reach the top. He thinks mortality and ethics mean nothing in the world of beasts, and it is the reason they exist in this world to struggle to climb to the top. Meanwhile, Donpal gets up again and Yule says he doesn't need to struggle so hard and that he will die just like them anyway. Donpal desperately remembers his third young master and wonders how he will save the squad members in this hell and fulfill his duties. Juhua is also worried about what she should do, and she needs to find a way out of there and needs to think in a hurry. Meanwhile, a beast rushes toward her from behind and is about to attack her when someone appears from behind and slashes the wolf into 2 parts. They are shocked to see that it is the third young lord who has come there for their help, and Elder Jung is also shocked to see him. He jumps upon them to attack and says there sure are a lot of beasts. He uses his demonic energy to tear many of the beasts. The beasts rush toward him and Hajin says it will be even better if they all come together at him like that. He uses his demonic energy to kill them all while Yule is angrily watching him and wonders who he is. Hajin says he came there to kill just one guy, but there is a whole mountain of trash he needs to get rid of. Everyone is watching him with hope, and he turns toward Yule and says he doesn't have the time for this today, but he will kill him too at least before leaving. He then sees Elder Jung and releases a large amount of killing intent toward him. He then asks him to just wait for a bit and he will make Sahimi out of his flesh. On the other side, the facility master is having a cup of tea with the Heavenly Demon Divine Cult's general strategist, Ho Yoseong. He says she is throwing away her honesty, and she says the other person will be taken aback if she suddenly changes topics like that. He states that he is talking about the third young lord, and says she has been meeting him quite often these days. She wonders how he knew about this, or if he has a spy on her, and he tells her that the Generella strategist position of the divine cult is rather lonely. So he has kept his ears open to what has been going on lately, and it's rather amusing, otherwise he wouldn't be able to survive there. He tells her people called her a cold dictator and one of the top slayers of the cult, but she hasn't been living up to her nicknames recently. She asks him if he is comfortable saying those things to her face, and he replies that people say that it's not a sin to talk bad about someone, even if it's the cult leader, as long as they are not present. He asks her to lessen his workload, and she thinks if things go wrong, he might be able to manipulate her. He acts like someone impulsive, but he's the scariest and pickiest person in the divine cult. Yoseong says he is curious about if the Internal Enlightenment Facility is breaking their neutrality and supporting the third young lord. She emphasizes again that the Internal Enlightenment Facility will not interfere in the successor fight. He asks her if she will do this as an individual, and she thinks that he is provoking him on purpose to try and see if she breaks. He says he can't interfere with the choice she makes, and he trusts her as she cares about the cult so much. He says he is curious why someone so loyal to the cult would send the third young lord outside of the cult without a single word to him. He then asks her not to take this as sarcasm or a threat, and he will not send her to the penal law hall or anything. She asks him why she is so curious about the third young lord, and he says this is just innocent curiosity. He exclaims that all of the divine cult has their attention focused on the third young lord, and people kill others they don't even know, so he thought he would save the lives of people he doesn't know instead. He is a successor candidate who has been growing more influential and stronger at a very fast rate ever since resolving his Kai blockage. Yeonsam says she can't describe how he is, and he should meet him himself. He asks her if there is something about him that can't be explained, and he smiles at her, saying he has never seen him talk about someone in such a manner. She says he can meet him whenever he wants, and he says something interesting happens whenever he feels too bored. He is thinking of treating him to tea once he returns, and thinks he will take care of all the work he has until he gets back. On the other hand, Hajin has killed many wolves, and the elder young wonders if he is from the demon cult. He observes that he attacks the wolves, but the direction of his bloodthirst is pointed at him. Yule calls him furiously and asks how he dares to kill the blood wolf squad in front of his own eyes, and Hajin asks him if he is the leader of these mutts. He also asks him why he is playing subordinate to that old man, and there is no point in listening to a dead man. He releases his energy and says he doesn't know where he came from, but he will kill him if he is also from the demon cult. Hajin thinks this man smells like the wolves, and Yule orders the leader of the wolves squad to attack him. Hajin thinks he orders the wolves around using a connection through their energy core. But Goldie releases his energy and stares at the wolf, which scares him. He releases a weird sharp sound, and it is so loud that everyone grabs their ears to protect themselves. In the meantime, the wolf falls to the ground in front of Goldie, and he jumps upon him. Yule is shocked to see a small but powerful beast and thinks it's a different beast wearing the skin of a beast. He wonders if this is a mystical creature that causes all kinds of mysterious happenings and legends. It's not comparable to any beast in the southern savage beast plave. Even the Tiger King looks pathetic in comparison. Hajin smiles and says he knows that he isn't just an ordinary fox, and Yule is surprised to see that he is not affected at all by that cry, while the cry should have put fear into the minds of all living beings who heard it. He asks Hajin who he is and why he is going around with a monster like that. He releases his demonic energy, says he will rip open that mouth of his, and uses the skill of divine southern wolf fist. Their fists collide with each other and Yule is shocked to see that his divine fist is losing to him. His muscles are being twisted, his bones are being crushed, and the bones in his left arm have been completely shattered. This isn't a matter of inner energy or skill, and he is just that much stronger than him. He was always confident that he was superior in strength to anyone except for Head Bear. Suddenly, Hajin disappears in front of him, appears in just a second, and punches his stomach badly. Yule is still shocked at how he can lose to a mere demon cult member. Hajin throws him away at a distance and says he remembers a sect that controls best and a sect that is as strong as the Central Plains Great Sect. He releases his demonic energy and says we'll kill him at the moment. Yule wants to say him something, but Hajin reacts quickly and cuts his head with the rock behind him. The Elder Young is also shocked that the successor of the Southern Savage Beast Palace was killed by that young demon cult member. He then rushes toward the Elder Young and says he has waited so long for him, but now he is dead. He jumps upon him thinking he could have just passed by since it was something that happened in his past life, and he could just live a new life. But his legs kept hurting, and he couldn't let it go and cut the same leg he cut off that day. He attacks him, but the Elder Young reacts in time and dodges his attack and is shocked to see the killing intent in his eyes. He wonders from where a demi-demon like him comes from and says he seems to be misunderstanding something. The ones that attacked his people were that group of beasts over there, and they were all unrelated to him. They have dealt with those wolves, so this fight is now meaningless, and he will be frank, although the powerful triad may be antagonizing each other, that is to a certain extent political territory. He asks him if there is a need to fight to the death needlessly there, and asks him to stop there and put away his sword. Hajin smiles and says people really don't change and his wicked tongue is still the same. He asks him if he is scared to fight in a battle for the first time in a while. The Elder Young is surprised and says they have never met before. He asks him if they know each other. Hajin smiles and says if he thinks they simply know each other, he releases his demonic energy and disappears in front of him. He thinks the speed of the dispersing traces is too fast and blocks his attack at the same time he reaches him. However, he is facing a problem in dodging the attack because Hajin is so powerful, and Hajin says if he died from one swing, he would feel far too disappointed. The Elder Young steps back and says the demon cult has created another obscene demon, and thinks he is stronger than he expected, but he can't just lose to a young man like him. He uses his sword to attack him, and Hajin thinks his body's aerodynamics are lower than his, so he receives internal injuries from an attack like this. His hidden move is white funeral swordsmanship, and he thinks the white sword dance may seem beautiful. The hidden blood third is as deadly as a poisonous snake's fangs, and now he will use his hidden technique to blow his attack. He uses his ninefold resilient calamity blade technique in the third form and 8 cold hell's bloody lotus filler with cold air, and prepares an attack toward the Elder Young. He is shocked to see that blade technique and thinks he has definitely seen it before. He thinks the righteous Heavenly Alliance's worst secret weapon assassinated all sorts of masters under the command of the leading power. He remembers this is the assassin King Chun Hajin's blade technique. The Elder Young removes his clothes and asks him about who he is to be using Hajin's blade technique. Hajin asks him if he remembers